Hi friends, it's your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons in context to the 2014 film Fury. So this is one of my favorite movies. It's a World War II tank movie. It stars Brad Pitt, John Bernthal, and Michael Pena, and um, it's a brilliant film, and it has a lot to teach us about life, and I think it has a lot to teach us about Dungeons and Dragons itself. So what I want to talk about today is disruptions at the table. So in the film Fury, um, so Brad Pitt is the tank commander, okay, and Michael Pena is the tank driver, okay, and then John Bernthal is the tank loader, okay. So they get to this German town, and they are this tank Fury. Fury is their tank. Fury is just tearing it up across Germany, and the tank commander Brad Pitt is determined to do the following. He wants to kill as many German soldiers as he can to help end the war as quickly as possible, and because they could tell they're close, right? They're like days or weeks away from the end of the war, right? Um, and there's a scene where Brad Pitt is like, I started this war killing Germans in Africa. I then was killing Germans in Paris. I then was killing Germans in London. Now I'm killing Germans in Germany. We're close, right? Like, and so but they get to this break point in the fighting, and they pull their tank into this small German town. Right now, at this point, this town has been secured, right? And the people who are living in this German town do not support the German army. And the way you know this is there's literally bodies hanging around with signs around their necks that says, "I am a coward and I did not fight for the German army," right? So this town is literally a German town that does not want the war to continue forward. They don't want to take over the world. They just want to live as Germans, right? They don't want to sign off on what their terrible leader is doing, right? And so there's these two German citizens who invite um, the soldiers into their home for a meal, right? And they invite them in, and um, and they're serving them eggs and bacon, right? Well, at this point, the tank commander sits down with these two German citizens, and John Bernthal is there and Michael Pena is there, right? And John Bernthal just is acting a fool, and he's insulting both of the German citizens, right? And and it gets so bad, right, that Tom Hanks says, both of the German citizens are women, and one is younger than the other, and so Tom Hanks, or actually Brad Pitt, he says, anybody who touches that girl, I'm gonna kick their teeth in, right? Like, and so John Bernthal like immediately like looks up, like, and this guy don't play, like the words that come out of his mouth happen, right? So John Bernthal's like, okay, we've been invited into this home. We're having breakfast. I want to eat this food. I want to take everything I can from these people, but I want to disrespect them. I want to yell at them. I want to insult them. I want to make their lives difficult, right? And the tank come in, and so that's the tank loader, right? And he's really being terrible, right? And what's interesting is then the and the commander is like, listen, he doesn't say it, right? He just kind of projects it. He like, we've been out, in wartime, right? We're killing people constantly, but we have this one like brief period of respite, right? We've been invited in to enjoy a meal. Let's just everybody calm down. Don't be jerks. Enjoy the hospitality. We have one brief moment where we don't have to murder people, and people aren't trying to murder us. So why be uncivil? Why disrupt the situation, right? And it becomes clear why John Bernthal is disrupting the situation. He's a bad person, right? He is just a bad person, okay? And he actually gets up and he grabs the girl's eggs that she's eating, right? And he licks them so that she can't eat her off her plate anymore because he's licked her plate. The tank commander, Brad Pitt, gets up, grabs the girl's plate, gives her his untouched plate, and takes hers, and then begins eating the eggs that John Bernthal just licked, right? And he's just like, I'm going to enjoy this meal. We don't have to be terrible, right? But then Michael Pena comes in, right? And he's like, do you remember horses? Right. And like, and Brad Pitt just drops his fork and knife, right? And then Michael Pena launches into this story about how they killed horses, hundreds of them, at the beginning of the war, right? And and Brad Pitt is so furious. He's like, you guys are the absolute worst. Why are you doing this, right? Like, and he's just so frustrated, right, at why this is happening. Because from his perspective, he's just like, hey, we're here, we have this respite, why not be civil? Why not let these people be civil with us? We're at a table. Let's all be civil to each other. Why do we have to be terrible, right? And Michael Pena then tells this story, which is incredibly disruptive to the dinner, right? And is disgusting. And so he's not like in your face rude. He's just rude in a different way. And then finally, Brad Pitt just slams, he actually stands up and he slams his plate down, right? And and you can tell he's furious, right? And then Michael Pena immediately says, I'm sorry, I was drunk, right? And so my takeaway from this is, first of all, this is a Dungeons and Dragons table, right? In that we get this, right? Like, and you and I have had this, right? And the reason why is I play physical table games, right? And this is one of the reasons why, right? And when you play a physical table game, you need people who are interested in Dungeons and Dragons, willing to show up for hours and hours and hours, weeks and weeks and weeks on end, right? And tell this collaborative story, right? And this is one of the things I absolutely love about Dungeons and Dragons. And Dungeons and Dragons puts in the game, here's how to manage problem players. And the reason why is it doesn't, like every other tabletop role playing game in the world, especially on the OSR and the indie side, are like, oh hey, if there's somebody who's not super, just the most wonderful, perfect nun at your table, get rid of them and go spread out your array of perfect, wonderful, absolutely non-offensive people to play with, because we know you have 20 people to pick from, right? And Dungeons and Dragons is like, no, like Dungeons and Dragons is difficult. This is very unusual. If you're going to play a physical table game, you're not going to have 100 people to pick from. You might have to deal with very problematic people, right? And it literally puts into the Dungeon Master Guide, this is how you handle problem players, right? And what I thought was really fascinating was there are like two ways that your table can be disrupted. I think two ways that we learn from Fury that the table can be disrupted is it can be disrupted because you have a terrible person at your table, right? Or you have a good person in a bad moment, right? And I find that fascinating, right? Because Dungeons and Dragons does not shy away from this. And every other creator today is like, oh, don't you dare play for 5 minutes with a problematic person, right? Just kick them away from your table and just spread out your array of players, right? And choose from the best, right? And first of all, I think this is terrible because I think most creators don't spend even 2 minutes thinking about the people who played their games, because they're creators, right? They're super smart, driven, task oriented, or they wouldn't have created their game, right? And so they assume that everybody's just got an array of people who want to play with them, right? And so it's unthinkable of them to play with people who aren't perfect like them, right? And I think I'm just fascinated by this, that even up to the 2024 core rulebook, right? It's like, hey, you're gonna get people who are at your table who aren't perfect. This is how you manage it, right? And it was the same thing with the tank commander, right? He's like, I need these guys to perform in the tank, right? And one of them's terrible all the time, and one of them's terrible some of the time, right? But we're gonna get this done, right? And I really feel like in a world where people can go watch movies on subscriptions now, there's 500 channels, there's amazing books, amazing shows. Nobody reads books anymore. Amazing video games, uh, apps that can connect people who have very unique social interests, right? And not even social interests, right? Like there's just so many ways to get connected now that this is a real thing where like it's really special that Dungeons and Dragons does not insist that the people at your table are perfect, right? And it's saying there's going to be disruptions at the table, but you're going to drive through and get the job done, which is playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? For the tank commander, it was getting that tank rolling, right, and doing what tanks do, right? But for a dungeon master, it's keeping the game going, right? And dealing with people. Now, what I think is really interesting, and which one of the things I've dedicated my channel to is there. Why is this? Why doesn't Dungeons and Dragons literally just say, "Hey, take these terrible people, go tell them to go kick rocks, and you just play with perfect people." Well, the reason I believe that is Gary built Dungeons and Dragons that as you play it, it makes you a better person, just like the commander made his guys better people by serving in the tank, right? And so I thought that was really interesting. Really, it definitely, when I saw this scene in Fury, it reminded me of disruptions at a table, right? And how Dungeons and Dragons is really special for taking all comers, right? Let's just say if you want to sit at this table and tell a story with us, you don't have to be a perfect person. We're going to work through your issues together, and a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, you're going to be a better person. I really believe that that's an unspoken promise of Dungeons and Dragons. I truly believe that that's what it's about. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider like subscribing and have a fetch millennium.